Hello everyone, Dr. Mike here. Welcome back to our series of tutorials on the ASM Hydrasynth. This time we're going to be talking about oscillators. I was originally going to be doing oscillators and mutants in one video, but there's so much going on the oscillator pages that I figured it would be best to break them up into two. You'll notice that we're focused on the center of the Hydrasynth now. This is important because virtually everything we're doing in this tutorial will be right here. This main screen shows our patch name, but when a note is played, this will become an oscilloscope so we can see the waveform we're working with. And in the master control section, we'll see the 8 parameters at a time that we're working with in the main display, which are controlled by the 8 LED knobs and 8 buttons. Just a quick reminder that during this video, this part of the front panel is going to be off camera, but I'm going to be using it. This is the module select area, and each of these buttons represents a module that's called up in the main display, which is what I'm going to be displaying. This time, I'm going to be using the 3 oscillators, 2 of the LFOs, and the mixer. There isn't anything else in this patch that is going to be relevant to what we're talking about. We're starting in the mixer module, so you can see the relative levels of the 3 oscillators, the ring modulator, and the noise source. In this case, they're all turned down to 0, so when we play a note, we won't actually hear anything. Nope, no sound, and you'll also notice the flat waveform indicating silence. So now we're going to go to oscillator 3 after turning it up. And the reason we're going to oscillator 3, if you've been following our series of tutorials, both in video on this video channel and also at musicplayer.com, you'll know that oscillator 3 is different than the other 2 oscillators because it runs directly into the mixer. Not only that, but it can't do wave scans. It only has single waves. That's not entirely true, as you're about to see, but it's true enough for our purposes. Now, this is the oscillator display for oscillator 3. You'll notice that it's currently set to a waveform called Flux 5. It's not detuned by any semitones or by any sense, and it's tracking the keyboard normally at 100%. Those are all the controls you have for a single oscillator. Now, what's Flux 5? Flux 5 is roughly at the center of the list of 219 waveforms that the Hydrasynth has on board. Why are we set near the middle of the list? Is because if we go to LFO 3, what we see is we've got an upward sawtooth wave with no delay or fade in. It's running at 0.04 hertz, which means it'll go through one ramp up in about 25 seconds. Phase is set to 0, so it starts at the bottom, it's single triggered, and the level is currently set to a level which interacts with levels in the mod matrix. We have LFO 3 in 2 modulations going to oscillator 3 wave position, and we've added 128 to 64.5 and then scaled it all by the amount in the oscillator itself. The reason we do that is because it takes a little bit of fiddling before we get to a place where the LFO will actually run us through the list of 219 waves from the bottom to the top, which we're going to do right now. Okay, check the mixer. Yes, oscillator 3 is up. That's Flux 5 showing in the oscillator window. Now, one thing you're going to notice is when we jump through these waveforms very quickly, or we start playing while we're on an editing page, it takes the oscilloscope a moment to catch up, and we'll allow for that when we play. So, I hope you caught all that, because there's going to be an exam at the end of this video. What we just went through were 219 different waveforms, starting off with basic ones like sine, saw, triangle, saw, square, and so on. Then we went through groups, usually of anywhere from 3 to 8 or 9 waveforms that are all kind of similar to one another and have similar names. At the very end, that last thing you heard was a set of 23 harmonics on the sine wave fundamental. Those can be useful if you want to do additive synthesis. Now, 219 waves takes a long time to explore. One of the more fun ways to do it is to go through the presets, of which there are hundreds on the Hydrasynth, and pick out sounds that you find interesting. You can also build a tutorial like this, which helps you get used to modulation and working with LFOs. So that's a basic single wave. Now, a Wavescan is a little different. You notice that when we played that scan through the waves, the transitions were very abrupt. With a Wavescan, what we have instead is a set of 8 waves that are interpolated. In other words, the CPU of the Hydrasynth smoothly morphs from one wave to the next. The Wavescan index here shows what wave you start by pointing at. It can be 1 to 8, and you'll notice as we turn it, starting at wave 1, which is a sine wave, it gradually interpolates through the various waves to create intermediate waveforms. Okay? Now, you can see in the oscilloscope what these waveforms look like. That's number 8. That's number 7, which is a saw triangle. It's number 6. Number 5 is actually silence. You can select silence in a wavetable, but if you turn that step in the wavetable off, the Hydrasynth will just skip over it and go directly to the next one. That's number 4. That's number 3, a basic square wave. Number 2 and number 1 is a sine wave. Now, what does this sound like? Well, right now it doesn't sound like anything because we've got this oscillator turned off. So we jump back to the mixer, turn off oscillator 3, turn up oscillator 1. And now, assuming we have everything set properly, it should sound something like this. One, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and back to 1 again. If we look at the wave list edit, what we see are 8 different waves occupying the 8 wave slots. In this case, I picked them because they're very different from wave to wave. The odd numbers are things which we're used to: sine, square, silence, and tri-saw, and the others are selected from the more complex wavetables. I did this not because it was very musical, but because it's easy to see in the display how we morph from one wave through all the others. You'll notice that we sit on the sine wave for a little while before we start the actual morphing. That's because it's a bipolar LFO, and I don't have the offset quite right to make sure that everything moves smoothly from the start to the finish. That's something you can tweak when you're programming a patch of your own. Now, that's not very musical. What would a musical Wavescan sound like? And for that, we're going to go to oscillator 2, which is set up somewhat similar to oscillator 1, except this time when we go into the wave list, we see that we've got 8 consecutive waves in the horizon series. Now, some of these series may only have 3 or 6 waves, some may have more. But there's a nice shortcut that I talk about a little bit in the thread on musicplayer.com, which lets you set up a wave sequence fairly quickly. If you hold the Shift key and then look at wave 1, all of the other 7 waves will follow it in the list. So hit Shift, turn to pulse 1, and you see 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 have followed it, and then we jump to horizon 1 and horizon 2, which are the next waves in the list. Now we go back to horizon 1, still holding the Shift key, and boom, there we are with our 8 horizon waveforms. Now in this case, we're modulating the waveform with LFO5, which is a sine wave, moving about once every 2 seconds. And that's designed to provide a fairly natural musical sound. Now in this case, the LFO has been set to polyphonic trigger synth, so you can get out of sync notes when you play them, and that gives you a bit more thickness. Between the single waves and the Wavescans, you've got all kinds of raw material, and we haven't even gotten into the actual timbre massaging parts of the instrument yet. So that's going to be next time, when we're going to look at the 4 mutant modules, which are signal processors that work on the raw oscillator signals. And until then, well, stay safe, stay happy, and stay connected.